The terror attack in Paris raises concerns about increasing anti-Semitism throughout Europe and the Middle East. Gary Lane, Julie Stahl, and Dale Hurd are here for more on this topic. Dale, anti-Semitism is on the rise in Europe, and you've covered that topic extensively throughout the years. How bad is the situation for Jews in Europe right now?
They tell me it's as bad as it's been since the 1930s. Virtually every synagogue that I've visited in Europe has security around it. Police, and often these synagogues have their own security details, synagogue members that have formed their own private security force to police the neighborhood. Jews in Europe tell me that they expect more Jews to die. They expect more Jews to be murdered. It's just a matter of where and when it will happen.
Gary, the Holocaust, the mass extermination of Jews in Europe, it's just barely 70 years ago. How can European governments be so complacent about anti-Semitism?
Well, they're complacent about a lot of things, Chris. Actually, complacent about the rise of radical Islam. They don't see radical Islam as a threat. And I think as you're seeing more anti-Semitism, more attacks in Europe, you're going to see more people in Europe, more Europeans standing up against this and putting pressure on their governments to respond.
Yeah, and Gary, it's not, obviously it's not just Europe, but it's also what's happening with anti-Semitism in the Middle East.
Well, anti-Semitism has been there for centuries in the Middle East, but it isn't just anti-Semitism, it's anti-Christianity. There are many Muslims that are very much against the Christians. As we know, ISIS talking to Christians there in Iraq, and also some that have fled violence in Syria. They are saying, and they have told me, that they really face extinction now. I had Christians telling me they expect maybe no more than about 150,000 Christians will remain in that country because of the rise of ISIS.
Right. And I know we'll talk more about that in the next segment, Gary. You know, Julie, one thing that's happened here in Israel is the record number of Jews immigrating from Europe here to Israel. What's happening?
Well, that's very interesting what Dale said, that the Jews are saying it's the worst anti-Semitism since the 1930s. The difference between now and then is they have someplace to come. They can come to Israel. So, and many of them are. Last year, there was the highest amount of French Jews ever. It was the highest amount of French Jews were the highest amount of Jews to enter Israel, and there were more than 7,000. But Natan Sharansky said 50,000 Jews, French Jews, asked for information on immigrating last year. That's amazing. And just this week, the head of one of the anti-Semitic watchdog organizations announced that he is going to immigrate to Israel, and he said it's a message, and the message is it's better to leave than to have to run away. So I think that's the trend we're going to see, especially of the French Jews. And
we just did a story back in December about not only French Jews, but Jews from Ukraine. So this seems to be an increasing trend throughout Europe and different places. Dale, back to you. I asked Gary this question. Why do you think some of these European governments don't recognize anti-Semitism, don't defend against it, and sort of don't address this issue of radical Islam?
Well, they play a double game. I mean, when Jews are killed, the head of state will go out and lay a wreath. But the big culprit in Europe is the media and the vilification of Israel. And anti-Israel has sort of morphed into anti-Semitism. And so the big blame lies with the media.
And what do you see for the next coming year? Do you see the rise of more anti-Semitism and the rise of radical Islam there in Europe?
I think it's only going to get worse, although the event that started today, you could call it in a sense France's 9/11, not in numbers of dead, but this is a wake-up call for France. And France is a leader in Europe, and perhaps we will see a change now in the way radical Muslims are treated.
And Julie, finally back to you. The year ahead, do you see more Jews emigrating from Europe and around the world?
I do believe they will. They'll be coming. I think that's what Israel believes too, that they're preparing for, for immigrants. They always have immigrants here. They have a very good system of absorbing immigrants, teaching them the language, teaching them Hebrew. So they'll be prepared.
Yeah, and I know one thing we addressed in our story, this is a prophetic fulfillment.
It is definitely a prophetic fulfillment, and the Lord is going to fulfill His word, and He says He's going to bring the Jewish people back from all over the world to Israel.
Yeah, and it's happening.
It is happening.
Well, Julie, Gary, Dale, thank you. Well, up next.